What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect. I've been shopping for handhelds for my friends for Christmas for little stocking stuffers, and I found myself coming down to 4 handhelds that kind of fit different people with different niches when it comes to retro gaming. And I know there's a lot of questions online comparing these handhelds to each other, so I thought I'd make a really quick video here, just kind of coming up with a couple pros and cons of each one that might help you narrow it down to that gamer in your life. Let's take a look. First one we're going to take a look at today is the TrimUI Brick, which is the newest handheld in this lineup of handhelds. But it's also one that's creating a lot of questions about, is this the best one to get, or should we look at one of the ones that's a little bit more tried and true, a little bit more tested, may you say. And I can tell you right now, the TrimUI Brick is what I have gone to as my EDC device. This is always in my pocket, whether it be the black one here or the white one. And I am waiting right now for the purple and red, so I can do a video for you guys on those. Those should be here shortly, but I have got some things that are a little custom that's going to happen with those. So once I get those, I will show those to you as well. I could have easily just sent the Brick to everybody, but it's really not the right device for everybody. So let's talk about the Brick for just a little bit. It is a smaller handheld than the others I have here. I do also have the Miyoo Mini, the RG35xx Plus, and the RG40xxV. These two are going to be very similar, and we will get to that as we get along. One of the biggest comparisons I do see is the TrimUI Brick to the Mini or the 35xx Plus, so I do see a lot of comparisons in there, and the 40xxV just seems to keep getting thrown in because it is a pretty awesome device, and it's really not that much bigger, and or it is the same price as the other handhelds. Some of the pros you're going to have here with the TrimUI. This is a 4:3 aspect ratio on a 3.2-inch screen, which doesn't seem like that spectacular. In fact, it's got the smallest screen of all these here, but the resolution on this is 1024 by 768, and in this IPS display it has a 400 ppi pixel density, which is freaking crazy for such a small display. It looks really good. It's going to play systems all the way up to and a little bit of Sega Saturn, and one thing that does help that along is the fact that it does have an overclock button right here on the side. Depending on how you set up your handheld with this extra function button or possibly one of these others, when you flip them or push them, it will overclock your GPU and give you that little extra bump you need to push you through some of the games. These do have built-in Wi-Fi. In fact, every device I picked here does have built-in Wi-Fi, hence why I didn't pick the RG35xx and we went with the Plus. It does have built-in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. It has a headphone jack on it, which we're kind of seeing a hit or miss on devices lately, so it's nice that they included that in here. It is the only device on this list here that does have stereo speakers. It does have all of its bumpers on the back here, and you can add, if you need, R3 and L3 through some function buttons if that's your preference. It does have 8 gigs of internal storage on a 3000 milliamp battery that seems to last for days. I rarely ever charge these. It has 1 gigabyte of RAM, and it is running an all-winter A133 Plus chip, and if that doesn't make any sense to you, just know that Plus is the overclocking capability. Its CPU is actually a Cortex A53, and it's at 1.8 to 2 gigahertz. This thing runs really well. But one of the things that people complain about this handheld, because it does push so much power in such a small device, is people say it gets warm. And specifically, this back piece here is made out of metal, and they say it gets warm. I think it just adds good build quality by having it be metal, but I've never actually noticed it getting warm unless right now I'm physically touching it. Now, this handheld has been on for over 40 minutes now, and it is not warm to the point where I wouldn't want to play with it. Also, when it does get warm, your fingers actually are nowhere near it because it's going to get warm up in here. And no, it's not from the CPU, which I know is the common misnomer with this handheld, because the CPU is actually down here. So it is getting warm from a thermal pad that's actually touching the screen to this metal plate to help dissipate the heat from the screen so you don't have the heat coming off the front so much. So no, it's not the CPU that does it. So that is the biggest complaint about this handheld. I have never had it bother me, and I've played this thing all day for days and never had any problems with how warm it gets. For some reason though, my black one does seem to get warmer than my white one. And again, I only noticed because I started touching it to figure out how warm it was really getting, because some people were like, this is unusable, and I don't know how that's unusable. I mean, yeah, it's warmer than some stuff, but it's not like it's hot. It's not like it's going to sizzle when you touch it. I don't know what that complaint is all about. Some of the other issues with this is the stock OS is kind of a bear. Now, I am running an unreleased version of CrossMix OS right now. I'm running 1.3.9, I believe, and 1.4 will be the version that'll be available for the Brick, which is not available yet. But if you buy it through someone like Mech DIY, which is who sent me this handheld, and I will have a link for them down on my thingamabob, you do have the option to get it with CrossMix OS pre-installed, and it will be the 1.39 version. When 1.4 comes out, you will be able to upgrade to that as well. The card that I have also has the Surwish ROM build on it, and it's freaking phenomenal. A couple other things you do have is you do have an extra Type-C port up here. No, it's not a charger charging port. This is your host port that comes out of here. You can plug everything from chargers to, I believe, an HDMI out at some point right through this port. Not sure the HDMI works yet. I have not tried it, but I have seen that on the building blocks for this handheld. It is running the same SoC as the TrimUI Smart Pro. So if you've used a TrimUI Smart Pro before, it will have the same internals as that handheld. You are, though, however, missing joysticks, which I think is a fault, but on this sleek little handheld, I don't think you would want to put them on there. Even if you could make them functional and look good, it still would have been goofy to have them on here, as this is supposed to look a lot like an analog pocket, and I think they just shrunk down an analog pocket. They nailed it. They even got the good screen on here. So I think that this is going to be definitely one to take a look at for anybody looking for Christmas gifts. The next handheld we're going to look at is the Miyoo Mini Plus. Now, this technically came out in 2023, but this is a very well followed handheld, especially with OnionOS. I would recommend, if you are going to get this for yourself or somebody else, you install OnionOS on this handheld because it's kind of worthless without it. Now, this is a 3.5-inch screen, again at a 4:3 aspect ratio. It is 640 by 480, and this is 228 ppi. Now, if you think about that, 400 ppi, 228 ppi. Big difference in resolution there, especially when you're looking at the 640 by 480 versus the 1024 by 768. Really big difference there on that. The handhelds are about the same size as far as actual physical size goes. The TrimUI Smart Pro, I think, is actually like a millimeter taller, if I remember right. It's definitely narrower, though, which makes a slight difference as well when you're trying to hold on to it. I have every color but white of the Miyoo Mini Plus. I don't know why I never got a white Plus or a white Miyoo Mini before. Those are the only two that I don't own in the colorway of either of the handhelds. I have been carrying this around since it came out, and I'll tell you what, OnionOS is really hard to beat. They do have a new A30 by Miyoo, which is using an OS called Spruce OS, which gets close, but the Miyoo Mini Plus with OnionOS is absolutely phenomenal. Anything you'd possibly want to do is built into the handheld itself, including Moonlight streaming and everything else, right into that custom operating system. Really, really cool, really good handheld. It does have Wi-Fi. It is a single speaker handheld. We'll get into that in just a minute, but we'll go through a couple other things here real quick. All storage on this is done through the external memory card, so anything that you want to do is done through your memory card here on the bottom. It does have really easy access to the battery, though, which is something that's really nice about the Miyoo's. The battery doesn't take a screw, doesn't take anything. You can just pop her right out. So if there is some reason you need to pull that battery, whether just to pull it or to reset it or to replace it, you can definitely do that pretty easily. And that is a 3000 milliamp battery, same as the TrimUI Brick. The RAM on this is only 128 megabytes, which is not that important because that is what you're going to need in order to be able to play. This does max out in Nintendo DS, which is something I wouldn't recommend trying to play on this anyways. Even if you find games that you're not switching screens all the time, except for in the menus, your switch screen is either going to be really small on here or it's going to be 100%, but you're going to be flopping back and forth. You're going to run into some issues with games like Sonic that actually use both screens, but there are some games, a lot of games, that you'll probably get away with it. It's just not my favorite system on a single vertical handheld to play. It's just not quite what I would want to experience. Maybe you or your friends would like that. I know my friends would get irritated by it, so if they're looking for DS, it's not a recommendation for me. This is running a different processor than everything here. It is a SigmaStar SSD 22D, and it's just a processor they used also on the original Miyoo Mini all the way through the V4 and the Plus models. This processor's been working really well, and it performs very well with OnionOS. Just by a single press of a button, you can go back through your entire games library of all these games you played and where I paused out at, and I go through Game Switcher here and just choose what games I want to be in. Something that's kind of unique to the Miyoo. I know they tried to do it with Garlic OS on the RG35xx. It never really worked the same, but the 35xx had some of its own good things as well. Now, this is running a Cortex A7 versus the Cortex A53 that was on the TrimUI Brick, and this is running at 1.2 gigahertz. Like I said, you're going to be playing up to Nintendo DS. Not a lot of the DS catalog will be playable on here, but it kind of gives you a footprint of where you can kind of play too. This was my EDC handheld until the TrimUI Brick came out. I have gifted and helped friends set up, I don't even know, maybe we'll just say dozens of these things where they've sent them to me or I've sent them out to them. And so this is a handheld that I cannot but recommend to somebody that's trying to get into the space or just trying to find something that they can carry every day. This is a workhorse, and with it having Wi-Fi built in right off the bat, made a huge difference. This is the reason why I fell in love with the Miyoo Mini versus the 35XX. Was the original 35XX didn't have Wi-Fi. With the Miyoo Mini, I could do retro achievements and things like that I found important to me, as well as scraping box art right from the Handheld, which again you weren't able to do with the other devices. So all these now again have Wi-Fi, so you are able to do those things with any of these handhelds I'm showing you here today. But I was already mentally and emotionally invested in the Miyoo Mini Plus before Anbernic decided to add Wi-Fi to the 35XX. Some of its downfalls are its speaker. In mine, I have replaced the speakers in every single one of my handhelds. It costs about $7. And you just open them up and replace the speaker. They make a little Sony speaker that fits in here, and it sounds much better with an upgraded speaker. I kind of forgot how good it sounded until I recently set one up for somebody with the stock speaker in it, and I was like, why is it so bad? And then I remembered that the speakers in these things are absolutely terrible. Now, I don't tend to play with the volume on a lot when I play with my EDC devices, because I'm usually like in line somewhere or doing something where I'm just not able to actually play at the time, but you do kind of want to have that capability when you want to have that capability. And so these kind of fail until you do replace that speaker. The D-pad on these are phenomenal. I didn't talk about that with the Brick, but the Brick's D-pad is good too. It's running the same as the TrimUI Smart Pro if you've ever used one of those. Same D-pad on here. The D-pad on the Miyoo Mini Plus is really good. It's got a good dish to it. Even if you go with aftermarket parts for it, they're still going to keep that dish, at least in my experience, which is really nice. There is a ton of accessories for this handheld. I have stands for charging. I have stands for displaying. Technically, my little Mech Warrior thing I put out sometimes is actually made for the Miyoo Mini Plus, but all these handhelds fit in it. But it was initially designed for one of my Miyoo Mini Pluses. Battery life on these is pretty good. It's pretty solid. Not going to be quite as good as the TrimUI Brick, even though they both are 3000 milliamp. The back buttons on here work pretty well. This is one of the only ones I don't have better back buttons on to actually make them work better, where they get a good slope to them, but they work for what they are. It's not a very rattly handheld, and I'll show you that here in a minute and compare it to some other ones that we'll look at here today. A quick little short synopsis of the Miyoo Mini Plus. It's definitely in high regards in my book, just workhorses for me. Next, we're going to take a look at the 35xx Plus. This is a great handheld. They added Wi-Fi to this. Now, I never got into the 35xx line. I really didn't get into the 35xx Plus either, which is kind of unfortunate because I know this is a good handheld. I do really like the 35xx-H, but we're not looking at horizontals here today. But the H is something I have played with a ton. The 35xx, I was still into the Miyoo Mini when this handheld came out, and all they did was took their old 35xx really that didn't have some of the features like Wi-Fi and stuff, and they added it to this handheld. So they pretty much made a Miyoo Mini version after the first time they swung and missed by not putting Wi-Fi on. People swear by this. I was set to get garlic on this. This isn't something that was sent to me. I picked this up on my own and really wanted to love this handheld, and unfortunately they just didn't pull through for me. Garlic has never come to this yet, though I've seen updates throughout the last year saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I gave it a shot. I tried. You can tell I even customized it. So I really did, want to give this the old college try. It just, for me, it wasn't the right handheld. But I have friends that swear by this, and they absolutely love it. Now, you can get things like Newly on here. You can get MinUI on here, things like that. They are available, some of the custom firmwares that are available. This does have the H700 SoC that is in 9 of Anbernic's handhelds this year. If you follow this channel, you've seen a review of all of them, except for the R34XX, which my review is coming for that very shortly. But this was the first H700 handheld to come out this year, and it is a solid handheld. Like I said, it does everything the Miyoo Mini does. It just kind of did it after the fact. It's also a little bit bigger than the Miyoo Mini, which just seems crazy to me because it is also a 3.5-inch screen. So we'll go through the specs on this as well. This is a 3.5 running a 4:3 aspect ratio. Another 640 by 480 display, and this one's 228 ppi as well. So more or less everything that we just saw on the Miyoo Mini. It does play to a little higher game set than the Miyoo Mini. This will play up to PSP. Now, PSP is 16 by 9, so it gets pretty tiny on here. Also, without any kind of joysticks, PSP is difficult to play in about 90% of their catalog because most games do require you have joysticks. But this does have Wi-Fi, it has Bluetooth, It has video out through this HDMI port on the top, which is a really nice luxury to have because you could use a Bluetooth controller and the HDMI out, and you have yourself a remote console that'll fit in your pocket, which is pretty nifty. The Miyoo Mini does not have HDMI out, so this does have that, which is really nice. You do have still your bumpers and your trigger buttons here on the back. This has about 3300 milliamp battery, which is a little bit better than the Miyoo Mini as far as milliamps go. Now the processor does use more battery power. It's not quite as efficient in my experience, so they tend to be about the same. It does have 1 gig of RAM, and it is LPDDR4, and it is again running the Allwinner H700 SoC. This is a Cortex A53, similar to the TrimUI Brick, which is also a Cortex A53. This does run at 1.5 gigahertz, and its GPU clock speed is 650 megahertz. You do have access to the battery, though I do not like the way they did this because they put a screw in here. It's pros and cons because the original Miyoo Mini had problems with the battery cover falling off. They fixed that in the Miyoo Mini Plus, but I think Anbernic didn't want to take any chances, and they put what seems to be a self-tapping screw right in here. Doesn't match any of the other screws on here, which are Torx. They want to make sure everybody is going to be able to get into it, so I guess that part is nice, and the fact that it does have a removable battery is really nice. My biggest complaint is how loud these buttons rattle. I know people think I'm crazy for doing that, but I'm not a fan of the button rattle. Doesn't do it for me. These do have a good D-pad. I'd say it's better than the original 35xx. You can do the tape mod on this one as well. That will prevent you from getting accidental diagonals because you will get some accidental diagonals from the factory. This is kind of at the end of when Anbernic was figuring out their D-pad because everything from here forward really is better than this particular D-pad, but this one is one of their better D-pads. Not quite as much of a dip in the center of their D-pad in the factory one, and as you can see in the aftermarket ones, because they mock the factory ones, not as much of a dip in these either. They do have a decent length of travel on their buttons. I guess I'm just hitting stuff and you guys can't even see what I'm doing. They have a decent length of travel on their buttons. It's not a ton, it's not overkill, but it is a little bit longer travel than most of these other handhelds are going to have, which is a nice little plus sometimes too. And you do have your headphone jack here on the bottom right next to your DC charging. All these are going to be picky as far as charging goes. 5 volts, 1.5 amps to 2 amps. You don't want to go any more than that, so just so you're aware, they are going to be a little finicky on what you charge them with. Keep the charging cable that comes in the box, because if all else fails, that cable should be able to charge these. Kind of the rule of thumb here. But other than that, I don't have a ton else to throw in here on the 35xx Plus. Again, I used it a lot when it first came out. I haven't used it much except for to test different firmwares. I'm actually went back to a stock firmware to try to test that out because I'm running a modified stock version right now to see if modified stock is still working with the stock OS, and it seems to be, at least with the version that I'm running. But this is a great stocking stuffer for anybody that's either just getting into it. And all these are going to be kind of the same. Anybody just getting into it or anybody who's been into it for a while. If they don't have any of these devices yet, they'll either add them to their collection or they'll start using them every day. But either way, they're going to want these at some point in time. Every single one of these is a good performer. Now the last handheld that I wanted to take a look at is the RG40xxV. This is another vertical with the same SoC as the RG35xx Plus, so it will have the same performance and power capabilities of that handheld, and yet it is a far different experience. Oddly, I think it's thinner. Oh, they're the same thickness, but for how big it is, it feels thinner in your hands. Part of it also is because your hands get to stretch a little bit more. There's better ergonomics for the buttons on the back. The D-pad and the face buttons are a little bit softer and also have less diagonals on accident through that D-pad. Now they did add a joystick to this one, which does make it a little bit easier for playing things like Dreamcast, N64, stuff like that. So it does have a D-pad that does make that type of gaming easier. Still does max out pretty much at some of PSP, but you can get away with some N64, some Dreamcast, like I had said. You can even try some Sega Saturn on here, though it's typically not the best experience on here. You are welcome to try it if you would like. Now this is another 4:3 screen, but this is a 4-inch 640 by 480, and it is 200 ppi, so it's actually a little bit less pixel density than we've seen in any of these other handhelds that we've looked at today. Obviously less than the TrimUI Brick, but less than the other two that we looked at as well, because those ones are in the 228 range. A little bit of difference, but not a ton. Honestly, if you're looking at all of them, this screen actually looks the best to me out of these three. The TrimUI just blows these away, but this one here looks the best out of these three handhelds to me personally. I love this handheld. I was carrying this as an EDC. It's a pocketable handheld if you don't wear skinny jeans, and if you wear sweatpants like I do pretty much every day, you can probably get away with it. Otherwise, this joystick may get stuck on your jeans pocket when you're pulling it in and out. This joystick can get stuck, but you can get away with it. I mean, some people will be fine. I did find that if I'm wearing jeans, if I just put my hand in first over the joystick and pull it out, it works fine. Not a big deal. It's not significantly bigger than like a cell phone. I mean, I know this is taller, but it's not really much wider, and it's really not much thicker either, so it's really not pocketable. But I'd say if you're wearing skinny jeans, you're not going to get this in and out, just because it's going to be too wide for those tiny little pockets, which is why I've never worn skinny jeans. Or it's just because I have weird looking legs. But let's not talk about that. But getting right along with this one anyways, this one does offer Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. It does have the HDMI out right here on the top, which is really nice to have. Again, you can use this as a mobile console because it does have Bluetooth capability, so you could use a Bluetooth controller and use this as your console onto a bigger screen. You do have all your shoulder buttons, which I just showed you, and you do have an L3 button here, though you do not have an R3. You do have an analog stick, which is really nice to have. This does have a 3200 milliamp battery, which is weird that it's less than our RG35xx Plus, especially with the handheld being bigger, but you don't really notice much of a battery difference. The battery does actually pretty well on this handheld. Internally, it does have 1 gig of LPDDR4 RAM, rocking again that H700 SoC. And this one is running a Cortex A53 again. Very popular CPU. All these are ARM-based devices. This is at 1.5 gigahertz, so the exact same. Like I said, these are running the same SoC, which is why you're seeing everything be so similar, and this is at 650 megahertz. One of the biggest downfalls is how big it is, but I think it's also one of the biggest pros. The bigger screen does make it a little bit easier if you do want to get into playing PSP on here, because you are going to be on a 16:9 screen. You'll at least be able to see it a little bit better on here. As you can see, it is a significant jump in screen size. I'm just going corner to corner here on the bottom, but playing PlayStation on this, your screen ends up being about the same size as the 35xx Plus on a 16:9 on here. So very, very nice screen. You do have a plethora of custom firmware for this. Again, no Garlic OS, but you do have your Newlies, you do have MinUI, you have MuoOS, and a handful of others. The stock OS actually works pretty good on this one as well. I was actually testing the stock modified OS on that one for this one, and I can transfer the card over anytime that I'd want. That's a nice thing about these H700 handhelds. You can swap your cards around or your game cards between the handhelds, no problem. But again, its biggest downfall is going to be its pocketability. This one's been very popular, and again, another handheld. I had no problem carrying this around every day. I really liked it. I also have a day bag that I carry with me, like an EDC bag. Sometimes I just throw this in that bag, which is fine too. Doesn't necessarily have to be in my pocket because that bag's always with me. In fact, I can fit my Steam Deck in that bag, so everything is pocketable, or everything could be an everyday carry, I guess. You do have some good travel on your buttons here too, just like the 35xx Plus, except for these are a little shallower, which is fine, because sometimes when you're hitting games, you want to have a faster response time. This will give you that faster response that you might be missing on something else. Since I did on the other ones, we'll take a quick look at a game here real quick, and then we'll come to a conclusion. Now, in conclusion, every single one of these is a good handheld in its own right. If you want the big screen, this is going to be the handheld for you, especially if you're going to try to play PSP on a vertical. I don't recommend doing it, but if you're going to, this is going to be the only one that's going to be a good one for that. It's not even going to be a good one, it's going to be a better one for that, and that's going to be because you're going to have the wider screen with the 4-inch, and you're going to be able to see it a lot better. The 35xx Plus is a solid handheld. It is a lot like the Miyoo Mini, but it does have some of that Anbernic charm to it, where it's got its little stubby back and everything to it. It is a good handheld. I really tried, but I never really got into it as much as I did with my Miyoo Mini Plus, which is a handheld that I have many of, all the colors but white. If you're listening to Mech DIY, I don't have any white Miyoo Mini Pluses or V4s, or anybody else that wants to send me one so I can do a video. That'd be freaking awesome. Otherwise, maybe I'll just have to pick one up for myself here while I'm doing my Christmas shopping. But the Miyoo Mini Plus is tried and true and tested as long as you have Garlic OS on it. I wouldn't recommend doing the Miyoo Mini Plus without Garlic OS, and if you purchase it without Garlic OS, totally fine. But if you want to put it on, pretty simple to do as well. You can do it yourself. It's not hard to do. But otherwise, our friends over at Mech DIY do sell this with Garlic OS on it already. And last but not least, the TrimUI Brick. This is my winner right now. This is my favorite handheld. As much as I love my Miyoo Mini Plus and my RG40xxV, the TrimUI Brick has everything for me. It's small, it's sleek, it looks gorgeous, it just has a really good form factor, it's just a beautiful looking handheld. It plays some higher systems than even I would want to put on here and play. With CrossMix on it, it works really well. It does work okay on the stock OS too, but CrossMix does fix a lot of those problems. So again, you can pick these up right now with CrossMix. Otherwise, CrossMix OS should be out fairly soon for everybody, but this is a perfect daily driver. It fits in my pocket no matter what I'm wearing. Yes, the screen is 0.3 inches smaller than these two right here, but I think it makes up for a lot of that in the clarity. It's actually still easier to see the things on the screen here than it is on either of these. And just look at it. I mean, just take a look at it. You can't go wrong. It's so good. And here he is, my little mech warrior guy here. This is actually made for the Miyoo Mini Plus, but I use it for everything. So usually actually this one sits in there because it matches, sort of. But hopefully I was able to help you out a little bit, just give you a little bit of basic information on these handhelds and kind of give you a little bit of disclosure as far as some of the differences and things like that. But if you have any questions, like always, leave them down below. I will try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. If you've been around the channel for a while and you've ever left me a question, you know that I'm going to try to answer it for you. If it's not today, it will be shortly. I will try to get an answer for you. So my personal favorite here is the TrimUI Brick. I think it's pretty obvious, especially in my content lately. I have loved the Miyoo Mini Plus for so long. It was really hard to pry it out of my hands, but the Brick has been just a game changer for me. It fits better in your pocket. I know it doesn't seem like it would, but it does, and I'm not sure why. You do have to occasionally be careful of these buttons. If you don't put them on all the way, you could lose a button in your pocket, but I haven't had any issues with it yet. I know my friend Hobby had lost a button temporarily, and so just something to be aware of. But they also add extra buttons in the box, so it actually comes with buttons so you can change the ergonomics on the back. I think it has the most to offer out of all these right now. I think it's the most next level. Again, this came out in 2023. Still very solid handheld. This came out at the beginning of this year. Very solid handheld, but pretty much using the same ideas as the Miyoo Mini Plus. And then we have the 40xxV. I love this handheld. This is a great gaming handheld for me, just with the bigger screen, and it does look clearer. Even though some of the clarity is supposed to be a little bit different, I think that with my eyes, the 40xxV looks better than the RG35xx Plus. This one just has more clarity to me, and I could be wrong, but in my eyes, this is the one that looks the best out of these two. And it just gives you a little bit more versatility on what you can play on this H700 chipset, because it does have this joystick here. So I know a lot of people thought it was goofy, and you can eliminate this joystick too for just a couple of bucks. On Etsy, you can buy an eliminator which puts a magnetic cover over this, and you can even get some that'll still use your LED lights in here, so you can kind of play with them a little bit. But they make little Pokeballs and stuff that go there, so if you want to eliminate that joystick, you are welcome to. I like having it there, but it's not required, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't have this. But when you remove the joystick on that, then it just becomes a bigger this, you know, kind of thing. But again, the gameplay on this is really good, and I just love how soft like the push of the buttons is on this, especially like your face button. It's a pleasure. It's a really pleasure to play. Where these are going to be more tactile, these are definitely more of a membrane, just a softer button push. But with the TrimUI Brick, it just is style, everything else. It looks like a mini analog pocket. It has screen resolution similar, or that same idea as to an analog pocket. I mean, even like the button layout in here is the same. And so they kept pretty true to that analog pocket, but yet still gave us something different and unique enough where I don't think it's a clone, but it is something that I can play every day. And busting in that same SoC that's in the TrimUI Smart Pro, which is what I like to call this all the time anyways, but having the same SoC SoC really gives a vertical handheld of this size just a lot of oomph that it probably doesn't need. So when you do want to play things, it plays them well, and you are able to upscale a lot, which I think is good because of the screen on here. You can do all the upscaling, and you can make these games look better than they ever did or were ever intended to. So I think that's really cool. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of information about all these handhelds and helps you make a decision for yourself or for your friends. Let's be honest, you're probably shopping for yourself, even if you are shopping for your friends, because if you're into this hobby, you're into this hobby. But if you don't have one of these yet, I definitely recommend that you get all of them. But I would recommend for sure, if you haven't picked up your TrimUI Brick yet, these just came out, get one right away. All these can be picked up over at Mac DIY. You can use my discount code, which is RetroSpec16. It's right here on the screen. They are running some really good promos right now. So if you're watching this before Christmas, they do have some really good Christmas promos. But if it's after Christmas, use RetroSpec16 and get a good healthy discount on their website as well. If you want to get these with custom operating systems, some of these do have the option to get them with them. So you can get OnionOS on the Miyoo Mini Plus, and you can also get CrossMix on the TrimUI Brick right off the bat. You can also get their Surwish memory cards. Everything plays on them, and they're all scraped. So you'll have all your game data already on the device. So some options you have there, and you can do that on a handful of websites. I like Mac DIY because they do support the channel, and by supporting them, it continues to support the channel, which is why I'm doing my Christmas shopping there as well. But that's all I got for you today. If you made it this far into the video, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, become part of the community. We'd love to welcome you into our community, and share this video with your friends. Sharing is caring, and it also is the number one way that we are growing our community right now is by shared content. So when you're done with all your paperwork, don't forget to check out one of these videos up here that Google picked out for you, or YouTube, or whatever. They say you're going to like it. I don't know if you're going to like it or not, but they're going off of your history, and they're saying that these two videos up here are ones that you're going to like. So check one of those out. But that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.